Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm Pippa from TTG Media. I'd like to welcome you to TTG's first ever Digital Destinations Festival in association with WTM. We've been running virtual events pretty much every day, actually, since lockdown began. But this week we're putting the focus very firmly on destinations. We have a 5-day program of different events designed to help travel professionals be inspired and informed about all the great places they can be selling and make some new connections so that they're really well placed to sell travel as the market begins to slowly recover. We've got a really exciting week ahead. We've got destination masterclasses taking place on Facebook Live across the week. On Friday morning, we've got a speed networking group training session taking place. That's with all 13 of our destination partners. And our lead partner, Tourism and Events Queensland, is also hosting a yoga session. That's tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Don't miss that one. And Queensland is also hosting a pub quiz on Thursday. If you'd like any more information about the agenda, or if you'd like to register for any of the events, then see ttgmedia.com/DestFest. But this morning we're kicking off DestFest with a 2-hour seminar where we'll be looking a bit more widely really at how, when and where we think the UK outbound market is likely to begin to recover, and also how UK traveller behaviour is likely to have changed as a result of what we've all been through over the last few months, and how the destinations we travel to are going to need to adapt and respond in order to tempt tourists back to kind of get tourism back up and running in this new world in which we're having to get used to living with this new health risk. It's really wonderful to have a global audience with us this morning. I've seen guests as far afield as Singapore and Tobago and Finland and Myanmar. So a huge welcome to everybody that's tuned in. Lots of guests from the UK and Ireland as well. And we'll be taking questions throughout the seminar today. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom rather than the chat function if you possibly can. It's just a little bit easier for us to manage. And if you miss any of the seminar this morning, you'll be able to catch up with videos of the sessions, which will be on ttgmedia.com later on today. So on to our first session of the morning, in which we'll be setting the scene by looking at some exclusive analysis of the very latest UK outbound market data. We're looking at how the impact of the virus on bookings has evolved over the last 3 or 4 months, and also taking a look ahead at what might be to come. We are joined by Juan Gomez for this session. He's an insights expert from travel analytics specialist ForwardKeys. They take data from a range of sources, particularly from the GDSs. And Juan will be joining us after he's presented his insight for a very brief Q&A session. So do type questions as we go. I will hand over to you now, please, Juan.
Thanks, first of all, to TTG for inviting us to be part of today's webinar. And let me start presenting my screen and presentation. So here we go. Right. So yeah, as you've mentioned, my name is Juan Gomez, and I'm insights expert at ForwardKeys. So for those of you who don't know ForwardKeys, we're a travel data analytics company based in Valencia, Spain. We provide clients with air travel data intelligence that we gather using different data sets to monitor the entire traveler journey. So that is from flight searches that people make on online flight search engines prior to booking a flight, to air capacity, to the actual bookings that are made and tickets that are issued, which give us the full picture of direct and indirect bookings. So using this information in this brief 10-minute presentation, I'm going to give you a general overview of what the impact of the COVID-19 crisis has been in terms of global departures, with a focus on outbound UK, and will outline the current trends we have identified for the future. So first of all, as you can all see, to put the UK figures into context, I would like to start by showing the global declines in departures by departing region year to date. As you can see, total global departures as of 6th of May, 5% down year on year. Asia Pacific has so far seen the highest decline, and this is due to the fact that the pandemic, or originated in China and the Asian countries halted travel before we did so in other parts of the world, such as Europe or the Americas. So moving on to the UK case, we see that all international departures from the UK to date have fallen by 51.5. Here, I would like to highlight the declines in both the top 5 European destination countries for UK travelers and top 5 long-haul markets for British travelers. As you can see, Italy tops declines amongst European destinations, due once again to being the country which first discovered let's say the extent of this crisis with the Lombardy outbreak in northern Italy, but as you can see, is followed closely by other destinations in Europe, such as Spain or Greece. In the case of long-haul travel, here on the right in the orange column, the reduction in numbers of visits has been slightly lower than those seen in Europe, but in any case, we'll still see pretty dramatic figures with declines of around 45%, for example, to destinations such as the US, whereas we know as well the coronavirus started a little bit later. So we move on to this other chart where we see the display of weekly bookings made since the beginning of the year up until the last week of April for future departures from the UK, divided by destination region. So in this chart, what we look at is the impact of the crisis in the number of bookings being made, but also we see here the net between those new bookings being made on a weekly basis and the cancellations being made. So here we have the dotted line. So any value before this 100% dotted line, that means that the net between new bookings and cancellation for that week was negative. So we recorded more cancellations than new bookings. So as you can see, bookings to depart from the UK in any future travel date have declined by 87% since January. So that is 87% less bookings compared with the same new bookings compared with the net bookings compared with the same period a year ago. The decline is bigger for flights to the Asian Pacific regions, whilst has been more contained for those flights to travel to Europe, but it's still quite dramatic at a 77.8% decline. So looking at the timeline here, as you can see, after China's introduction of travel restrictions on the 20th of January, bookings to Asia started decreasing and continued a consistent performance for the whole month of February, as you can see here. Whilst on the contrary, bookings to all other global regions remain stable, albeit as you can see in the red. Another turning point in this timeline is the last week of February, as you can see here, this other black line, when the aforementioned Lombardy outbreak was discovered, and bookings to not only Europe but to all other global regions plummeted, hitting a minimum in mid-March. You can see here, and since then the equation I was mentioning earlier of new bookings and cancellation has sort of stabilized around -50%. -40%, all weeks with values, as I say, below 100. That means that we have more cancellations than new bookings. Despite the graph showing this sort of like ascending line, and this might drive us into confusion, but this is mainly due to the fact that there are less and less bookings to cancel, while we are barely recording any new booking. Okay, so before moving on to the outlook for the summer season and the rest of the year, I would like to have an even closer look to what happened here when we were mentioning about the Lombardy outbreak. So here in this graph, what it shows is the extent of the damage. So we go back to 20th of January when the two first coronavirus cases were identified in Italy, we see this is the blue line of, in this case, is not bookings made for travel from the UK, but as you can see in the title of the graph, for any international bookings for arrivals to Europe and Italy. So we see the blue line, which is bookings for arrivals into Italy, have a huge drop here and then bounce back and stay pretty much stable until, again, we encounter the Lombardy outbreak. And as the coronavirus cases climb, we have bookings to both Italy and the rest of Europe decline at a similar pace. So now we have let's have a look to what's the outlook for the top 10 long-haul destinations for UK travelers for the months of June, July, and August. So this is basically the level of bookings confirmed as of now for travel during those summer months, and this is the comparison with last year. And we see figures in the ranges of -40%, -60%, all pretty much the same. But as you know, as I was saying, the outlook for the summer looks challenging, but we also need to put things into context. So here we have the distribution, the usual distribution of those bookings, or the lack of them. So basically, here in this graph, the distribution of bookings for long-haul travel in the summer months from the UK. So this is when British travelers do book their summer holidays for long-haul destinations, and we see that over 40% of the total bookings for trips between June and August occur normally, taking 2019 as an example, between May and July. So quite the last minute. But again, we see here entering March and April that bookings in this year for this period were already in the negative. Here, what we have is like going back to talking again about this weekly new bookings and cancellations. Of course, despite having such negative comparison year to year, here we have the bookings that have been made in April. So what we have in these two lines is, in blue we have the travel distribution of the bookings that were made in April 2019, whilst on the orange line we have the distribution, time distribution of those bookings that have been made in April. So we are still recording bookings, but as you can see, numbers. So what we can still appreciate is some sort of seasonality. So we see here the peaks around the autumn half term in late October, the Christmas holidays in December, and then into 2021, the spring half term in mid-February, and the Easter holidays. What sort of destinations are British travelers booking or have booked this April such long in advance? We see things such as trips to the USA, to Florida, UAE, so kind of like long haul. But again, let's bear in mind that the level or the volume of bookings made in April for future travel was 90% down year on year. Just to finalize, let's have a look at what flight search data is telling us. So here we have a breakdown of flight searches performed for departures from the UK in the next few months. So again, comparison between 2019 and 2020, what we can see very clearly is how the flight searches performed in April 2019 were mainly for the summer months, June, July, and August. We see these longer bars, nearly, well, above 15%, whilst on 2020, this April, much less. So we have fewer people searching flights for these travel dates, and that is because even though we still see an appetite for travel, we see that travelers understand that it's going to be very difficult to travel in the next couple of months. But then we see a change in trend, and that is from September onwards. And we see that the blue line, which refers to flight searches performed in April 2019, were much lower than the ones that we are seeing this year in orange. So basically, people are looking mainly, or more than they did last year, for travel in the second half of the year or the last quarter of the year. As you can see, October, November, and especially December, a higher percentage of flight searches being made in April for flights in December. Then looking on what destinations are people in the UK looking for, we see that we're going to take as an example July and October. And we see that for both cases, we have Spain and the USA in top first and second positions. But the key is top destinations that are not quite up there. So, for example, for travel in July, we have ranking third Pakistan, which is followed by India and other countries that point to visit friends and relatives trips. So we have flight searches, for example, for Pakistan, being made mainly from airports, for travel from airports such as Birmingham or Manchester, which sort of like points to the fact that it's people that are trying to go visit friends and relatives in their origin countries as soon as possible. That is in the next couple or three months. However, when we look into October and we look into the top destinations, we have a different picture. So now on the third position we have UAE, but also we have more and more Asian destinations such as Thailand or Indonesia that were not in the top countries in July, but they are in October. So that could also mean that people expect to be able to travel back to those destinations in the last quarter of the year. And that's it. So before finishing, I would like to stress the importance of data, and especially in these challenging times, and the importance of making smart decisions based on whatever data we have available. And just I'll leave here my contact details in case anyone wants to drop us a line. But yeah, I remain at your disposal now to answer any questions that listening to us may have.
That's great. Thanks very much, Juan. That's a kind of a sobering reminder of just how many bookings have been cancelled and how much the bookings have slowed down, really, but also great to see some vague positivity about what people are searching for to depart a few months down the line. And it seems quite clear there's going to be a huge pent-up demand for travel, which is encouraging. You mentioned that 40% of long-haul bookings for June, July and August would actually normally be made in May, relatively close to departure, which would lead us to believe there's still potential possibly for some business to come in for the end of the summer. Would that be similar for short-haul bookings as well, that actually a lot of them wouldn't have been made yet to depart in August, and perhaps kind of a little bit of positivity there that might still come in?
No, of course, for the short haul is even higher, the percentage of bookings, because people tend to book in closer to the travel date. As we, I don't know if you remember the graph, we saw that in August the number of those bookings was very low compared to what we were recording in May, June, or July. However, for short haul bookings, August still retains a certain amount of bookings, of last minute bookings that still come through in August. So we will be talking, instead of 40%, we will be talking about around 60% between May and August. So even higher.
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of accepting that departures in May is unlikely, but feeling perhaps a little bit more hopeful that some business might come in for August, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you shared a graph which described the bookings that had been made in April. I think it was 30th of March until the 3rd of May. Very small numbers, 90.5% down compared to last year. But did the pace at which those new bookings came in change at all over that 4 or 5 week period? Was there kind of a gradual improvement, or was it quite consistent across that 5 week period?
It's been pretty consistent. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any changes. So if we go back to March, we saw that all the way until mid-March, we were having like declines in the number of bookings being made of around like 30-40%. From the 3rd week of March, we saw that dropping to around 60%. End of March reached almost -90, and it's been stable all the way through April at around -89, -93%. And as you see, the overall picture for the month of April has been around 90% decline. But yeah, we haven't seen yet a sign of recovery, which perhaps is due to change now that countries are easing restrictions, and we were seeing yesterday the Prime Minister. Is a very rapidly evolving situation, so we're hoping to see those green shoots soon.
Yes, yeah, well, I think we can all agree on that. We've actually run over by a couple of minutes already, Juan, but thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing that exclusive up-to-the-minute data about what's on the books at the moment. And if anybody had any further questions for you, I saw a few, perhaps I'll channel those through to you.
Absolutely.
But thanks again, Juan, for joining us.
Thanks to you. Thank you. Bye.